Welcome to the Alcohol Addiction Podcast. I'm, of course, your host, Lee David. Today I'm joined by James Quigley, anxiety coach. How do you become an anxiety coach, James?
I think like you become an addiction coach, you go there yourself and try and find a way out of it. My journey is probably similar if you look at it high level to yours of struggling with something, trying to find a cure to it. Realizing that you've got over it and thinking, well, now I can go back and serve people because I know what it's like to be there. So for me, I went down the route of training as a hypnotherapist, and then I started training in NLP, working with some of the top coaches around, and just step by step starting to break down all of these anxieties like social anxiety, OCD, insomnia. They all just kind of fell away. So at the end of it, I was in a position really where I was just motivated to go out and help other people get through that.
Just tend to happen like that, doesn't it? It's almost like you feel like you've found the secret source of life, and you look around and you start wondering why nobody else is getting it, and you start singing from the rooftops, here's the answer, and everyone's looking at you like, who is that dickhead? What is he on about? You know what I mean? What was your main issues then, if you don't mind me asking?
I think I suffered from a lot of them, particularly through teenage years. So I had things like OCD. I had insomnia all the way from maybe about 13 to about probably kind of early 30s as well. But the big one for me, the breaking point, was social anxiety.
Right.
And I remember one day, it became conscious to me one day of just kind of walking down the corridor, and people have social anxiety, they probably relate to this, but you almost feel as if you're becoming conscious of your steps walking past people because your mind is telling you that they're talking about you. And one day this all, again, just going through some of the training that I was doing, just became really conscious to me that was something I had lived with all my life as well. I did stress as well. I came from a corporate background, so, you find ways of dealing with stress. But, I guess that was the one main thing that I think I carried throughout my adulthood that held me back. So you end up don't go out to parties. So I guess like your followers deal with addiction, so that's their way of coping with certain issues in their life. And my way of coping with that is the same for many anxiety sufferers, is to avoid situations. So you don't go out, you don't mingle, you find your excuses so you don't have to deal with things. And then, of course, you're just building it up inside. So you're looking for an escape to release all of that as well.
It's really interesting. When I was in my previous life, before I stopped drinking alcohol, when I was let's say the ages of 14 to 35, I always felt like I was a super confident person. I was also in corporate background and, very high up, senior position in a company, a lot of responsibility. And it wasn't until I quit drinking and someone said to me, well, what do you do to handle stress? When I turned around and said, well, I never have stress. Well, now looking back, obviously I was riddled with it, but I didn't realize I had stress and anxiety until I actually quit drinking, and I started to learn and read more about it. And then I started to actually see signs within myself that things weren't quite going as well as they were. And I often put it down to thinking more clearly. Does that make sense? Like I don't think I ever used to think before. I obviously did, but it was more automated. And then when I quit drinking, I call it white space. Like I had all this time out here and all this space in here, and I started to think a lot about stuff. And with that thinking came some anxiety. So let me throw one at you, James. One that I've literally had all my life, and it's money. And a lot of people listening to this will relate. A lot of reason people turn to alcohol is because they worry about finances. They are broke. They don't know where the next money is going to come from. They got stress in their relationships through the money. And I've always been a little bit like that. And I want to give you an example of what's been going on for me in the last couple of days. And let's talk it through and maybe people can relate. I went to a baby fair in XL in London, right? And I think it was like 32 quid to get in for me and the wife. And And then I just knew she was going to spend loads of money on baby stuff, which for me is just like, whatever. Like, it doesn't like turn me on. Like, it's baby stuff, right? So I ended up having a really bad day, really bad experience there, which if she wasn't such a great wife would have really rubbed off on her experience. I started to develop physical pain in my back. I felt tired, and really down in the dumps. Yesterday, I woke up, and this is 2 days ago. Yesterday, I woke up and I just couldn't get out of a funk. And I really believe it was still related to the money issue and spending too much money. It was still on my mind. Today, I woke up great, like in a real top form. And my son, who doesn't live with me, just sent me a message on Facebook a couple of hours ago saying, Dad, can you order me some more vitamins and supplements that you used to get for me? And I really want to get them for him. And I'm going to, because health comes before money. But my mood changed. And I realized that the reason my mood was changing was all of a sudden I wasn't thinking about my son's health. I was thinking about where on earth am I going to get the money from to buy these things, knowing that I've already gone over budget because of the baby fare. And then also a little bit of anxiety talking to my wife about spending money on my son, who is not her flesh and blood and doesn't live with us, knowing that we haven't really got the money. And it really changed my mood. And I just actually went on the Facebook group that we're members of, the Jamie Smart's Facebook group, and just wrote that out on there and just said, like, someone help me out, because I don't know how to switch from being in that moody place to being okay with it. I know it's outside in thinking. I get that, but I can't switch my mood, and I'm worried that by not being able to switch my mood, I'm affecting those around me in a negative way. Well, I could just hurled a load at you there, James. So just whatever comes to mind, fire away.
Yeah, I guess the thing about anxieties is that, and most people relate to this once they're only past it, is that the thing that's causing your anxiety is possibly not the thing that's causing your anxiety. It's the thing that the rational mind thinks is the anxiety here. So in terms of money, so I guess if we will look at the money situation because this is a couple of things that's come up on. So you've been out the other day, and £32 is an expensive amount for a ticket. I would agree. And then the wife's going to go and spend some money, and then your son wants you to spend some more money on vitamins. But I'm guessing that if your sons want to spend some more money on vitamins, it's not going to break the bank. Actually, it's just the whole thinking that you're getting into this mindset around it. So I guess, what does money mean to you would be the question I would ask. So if you had more money today, what would that mean for you?
If I had more money today, I would be able to spend 100% of my time doing what I love, which is this. I have, my wife is from California, so I wouldn't have any problems flying her family over to see our daughter, flying over there. I would be able to buy a home. I'd feel more secure. I'd be able to give more money away. I'd be able to help my my son and my daughter with their schooling. And I guess the main thing for me actually is just fulfilling my role as a man, which I know is nonsensical and is outside in contaminated thinking by a mile, but I just can't seem to shake that responsibility that I've hurled on my shoulders, that I am the man who needs to keep the family together financially. And I guess, James, I'm not very good at that, because then when my wife wants something and I should be saying, no, we can't afford it, I guess, worry by creating that boundary that maybe she won't think that I'm the best man. So maybe she might find another man. And I guess I've been divorced before, so I don't know. I would like, and obviously that plays a part into it, but I was always a bit like this with money anyway, my previous relationship when I was rock solid, never thought that she would ever leave me. So I don't know if that helps.
No, I mean, absolutely. You've just really given the answers as to what more money would mean to you, and you've said stuff about security in terms of more job freedom and stuff like that. So that's what money means to you, and that's what's really lacking just now. I mean, I think the interesting thing that you said there, and I think a lot of your listeners are going to relate to, is that kind of, I want to phrase this in a more generic way, but you want to feel like you're not lacking to other people around you. You know, the impact of money doesn't create a weakness for you around your family. Does that make sense? I'm trying to make this generic, that because you said about being a man around your family, you didn't want to.
Yeah,
do you know what I mean?
Well, that being a man around my family, actually, I can change that word to husband. I don't care what my kids think about me in that regard. I want to be I know I'm a good role model for my son, because bizarrely through all this, James, I've always had money. Yeah. Right, and I've not been in debt since I quit drinking, and I think that's what I'm worried about. I think my reserves of money, my emergency fund, is slowly dwindling, and I don't want to get back. Maybe I'm associating debt to when I was drinking alcohol, but I don't care what people think about me necessarily. Otherwise, I wouldn't be having this podcast and telling everyone that I'm worrying about money. Definite link though to my wife. Yeah, I am.
So yeah, I think I came up with a phrase there in my head, and I've just lost it again. But it's that being able to be there for the people around you, be the rock for them. Yeah. And I think that's the piece that a lot of people relate to when it comes to money. And I don't think it's just a man thing. I think there's a woman thing there, that they just worry or get anxious because they can't be that thing that they think the other person needs from them. And it's almost like predicting what the other person needs from them, because like you said, you've got money there, it's not a big issue, but it's that kind of underlying thing that's in there. And yeah, maybe it comes back to past relationships. A lot of these things come back to our experiences in the past. Anxiety is often born out of actual childhood events that kind of build up over time. And then there's kind of one big bam that happens to us, maybe in adult life, maybe a breakup, maybe a death or something like that. And it all rears its head again. So that's kind of, I guess, a common path for anxiety that I see throughout life. So if you're talking about having been in debt before as well, that could be kind of anchoring you back there. That almost of, you see the bank balance going down, and it may still be high enough for you, but it's taking you back to that place. Well, I know when it went lower and lower before, that's really raising this. So that could be really more the source of it. I guess a lot of, when it comes down to money anxieties, and I don't know your real past, but what I find is, particularly people from maybe poorer backgrounds, or maybe who wanted for a bit more when they were younger, or there was rationing, shall we say, in the household, they kind of find it hard to lose that mentality over their life. It doesn't matter if they become millionaires. If they were brought up in a council house, they've always got that kind of inherent fear that it's all going to be taken away from them again.
I was brought up in a council house. So I was brought up in a council house, 4 kids, dad earning next to nothing, mum having to look after us, really not liking my parents because they found money to go drinking. Well, my dad did, but I couldn't get what I wanted. My friends had everything that I didn't have. So I grew up really with that feeling of lack. Almost definitely, you know. But I know, there's the thing, I know that, right? So I know that these thoughts of lack and these feelings that money's difficult to get, all comes from that era. And I know that rationally. But when I sit down with Liza to do our budget together, I can't stop us arguing. So what I do is I say to her, I don't want to do it with you. I want to do it on my own. So then I try to take control of it all myself. I don't know what it is. Like, I just cannot sit down with her and talk about money without being comfortable with the anxiety that comes up about it.
Well, I guess that comes down to treating anxiety, because the way I tend to work with my clients is there's no magic pill out there for anxiety. I've written a book on it, and it will tell you how to identify these kind of childhood trigger events, because, like you said, it's the formative years. And although it's rational now to look back, the child's mind at that point in time didn't process it rationally. So that's what you tend to find with anxiety. So I work with clients to go through the whole spectrum. But the first starting place is really to how to deal with the anxiety today, because everyone wants relief from it, which I'm hearing in you as well. You don't want to be thinking this way. You don't want to be feeling this way. And I mean, just to anchor back to what you were saying about workplace stress as well, for many people, they don't even know that they've got anxieties because they're not conscious of it. They just go the other path. So I go through a system with clients called a kind of thinking model, which is maybe developed off of some of the stuff that you and I have been trained in before. And that works along the lines of thoughts will come into our heads. We'll do some thinking about those thoughts. We'll get some feeling in our body. Because of that feeling, we'll take some action. And because of that action, we'll get some outcome. And that outcome is usually a bad one if we're coming at it from a place of stress. So when it comes to thought is that thing that comes through you. It's not really something you control. And I know a lot of people, when they have thoughts coming into their heads, especially people with OCD, they want to control the thought. And you know, that's just something that you're not going to be able to do, especially if you're an anxiety sufferer, because the thoughts are often going to be of a negative connotation. The next piece in the cycle is really the thinking piece. And this is the bit where you can have control over. So a thought comes into our head, and I'm thinking about your money just now, and I go thinking, I could easily just go thinking, trying to work out what your life is all about, predicting what you're thinking. Even when I'm speaking to you, I could be predicting what you're thinking about what I'm saying. And a lot of people do that sort of thing. And the first thing really there is to become conscious of the thinking that comes into your mind. There's a lot of people, like you said, it just goes on autopilot. The stress goes on autopilot. The thinking goes on autopilot. And it's to become conscious of that. I mean, us as human beings, we've got this real great ability where we can just pause real life for a minute, and we can go inside our minds and we can analyse things, and we can come out and just calculate what the answer should be, and we'll deliver it.
Can I just stop you there, James?
Yeah.
In terms of the consciousness part of it, being like aware of it, I'm much better. I'm 99.9% better than I ever was at that. A lot of the times I screw up something, I make a mistake or I upset someone, and then I get it. I'm able to reflect back very quickly. But now I'm even beginning to get ahead of the race, so to speak. You know, and like today, I was hyper aware that my mood was changing because of my thoughts, and that's when I went on the Facebook page to seek help. Right. For people listening who haven't reached that stage yet, what can they do to create that conscious awareness?
That's a good question, Lee, actually. I think the reality is, if you're in a period or a position of anxiety, it's all fine and well me saying just listen to your thoughts and, you know, you'll become conscious of them and everything will be great. The reality is quite different. You need to get to a place where you can do that. One of the techniques that I give my clients, which they have great success with, is called square breathing. I was actually speaking to my mother about it the other night. She uses it now when she starts to get anxious. And so the idea behind square breathing, for those that aren't aware, is that we have to kind of start to control our breath. So especially if you suffer from anxiety, you're rubbish at breathing. You might think that you're great at breathing because you're not dead, but actually anxiety sufferers are the worst at breathing. And you know what it's like when you lose your breath and you start to feel all hot and the chest starts to compound and the heart goes. We've all been through that. When you had stress, it was probably the exact same as well. So the square breathing technique is quite simple. It goes like this. You breathe in for 4 seconds. You hold for 4 seconds. You breathe out for 4 seconds. And you hold for 4 seconds. And if you just practice that a few times, you find, well, You'll notice my voice has dropped a little. It just starts to relax you. It may take a wee bit of practice for a complete beginner, but within a few minutes you'll have got that.
So you're changing physiology.
That's exactly what you're doing. You're wanting to calm all the bodily features that are going against you at that point in the moment. So if you can start to control some of that a little bit better, then you're going to have a better success at becoming consciously aware of what you're thinking.
Yeah, so, good idea. Yeah, because you not only are you changing your physiology, so your whole body starts to feel you're slowing down. You're going to gain more clarity in your mind.
That's absolutely spot on, Lee. Yeah. So when you're starting to think about these things and these thoughts coming into your head, again with this additional clarity, it's starting to focus on the thoughts that do come into your head. So what are they about? So for you, your thinking was what? About money? It was probably beyond that, wasn't it? When you were thinking about it.
It was, yeah, I get it was a lot deeper. It was about being able to provide. So what just came up for me when you said that, James, is I want to be able to give my services away to people who need it.
Yeah.
But I can't give my services away to people who need it until I'm a multi-millionaire that enables me to give it away. So I have to charge people who maybe can't afford it. That bothers me. It bothers me that I have to work really hard in order for me to earn money to provide my family with what they need. But that takes time, which means I cannot then be with my family and share that time with them. So then I feel like I'm in a bit of a tight spot where my kids and my wife want my time, but I can't give them my time and earn the money. So I feel like I have to sacrifice one or the other, and having been divorced and not having a kid who lives with me anymore, I didn't spend any time with him when he was younger like I do now as a stay-at-home dad, because I was working 12 to 15 hours every day. And then when I come home, my boy would grab me by the ankle and say, "Come and play with me, Dad." And I'd be like, later. And the next thing you know, I'm giving him a kiss. He's going to bed. So, you're right. It is not just about money. It's about being a provider, being able to putting pressure on myself to help so many people that I kind of forget that I have to look after myself, I guess.
So there's a lot of things in there, and once you start to listen into your thinking, and again, you need to do this at a kind of after doing the square breathing technique. But once you start to listen to your thinking, these are the things that start to come out. Because if you're in an anxious zone, you would have just went, "It's all about money. It's all about money." But when you start to relax, you start to see that it's not about money. It's about providing. It's about my flexibility. It's about how I feel charging people who I'd rather just do this service for free. If money was never an issue, it's all of those little things. So that's the next step in when you're thinking about the thinking, is start to give it labels, because the more labels you can give it, the less power it's got over you. You don't want this thing running on autopilot for you. You want to be able to give it labels so that when it keeps coming back, you can say, well, that's my issue about the flexibility. I need to deal with that. It's almost like parking it so that it doesn't allow you. Because what comes next if you don't allow it to you is the feeling. So the third piece in the thinking model is the feeling. That's what's coming next for you. And again, some people don't notice this with anxiety. For some people, it's all about feeling. But what happens is the thought comes into the mind. You have some thinking about it. It's generally negative or tiring, like you were saying, and then you notice these feelings. And I think you said you got them in your back. People, when they have anxieties, get stomach, chests, arms. Typically, these places are anchored to places where they have had problems before, had issues before. So you may have noticed you had back problems probably during a time of when you had money problems as well. They're often repeating things.
It actually, good point you said that. When I quit drinking alcohol and my first wife divorced me, I started to develop chronic back pain. And I read a book by Dr. John Sarno called Healing Back Pain, where he talked about the way that the mind creates physical pain in order to prevent you from dealing with your emotional pain. And once I read the book, my back pain went away. But like everything, that knowledge that I gained through reading that book, I hadn't mastered it. And then I move on to something else, and I think now it comes back to me, and I just have to keep remembering the lessons that I learned in that book. And I say doing the work, but I'm not quite sure sometimes what doing the work is. I guess the breathing technique that you introduced is part of doing the work. What else is doing the work? Carry on, I guess. Yeah.
No, the feeling thing, like I said, that tends to be anchored in. The most common one is that feeling in the gut. You know, a gut is turning when you're anxious about something. Again, that's something that's just repeated all through life for people, but it's maybe a more common one that they don't associate with anything. It's just a general anxiety feeling. But that's the next thing, I guess, is to become conscious of that. And when you are conscious of it, well, what does it feel like? What does that actual feeling feel like? You know, does it swirl around? Does it move back and forward? Is it big? Is it small? Is it warm? Is it cold? Again, we do all these things in autopilot, but we don't actually look at the feeling. We just sort of accept it. Oh, it's that feeling again. You know?
Yeah,
and when you start to tune into it.
I tell you what my feeling is. It's actually easier for me to describe how it feels once it goes away than it is to describe what it is. So yeah. For me, when I've somehow managed to flip the switch or change my physiology, I feel light, like there's air in my stomach, and that air again starts to circulate around my inner body, and it's only very brief, but it makes me feel amazing. And I guess my search is always, how can I get that airy feeling? So I guess the counter to that is when I'm stressed is this tight knot, which I don't feel it, but I do feel this lightness when I've got rid of it.
Yeah. I think you're talking about nirvana there. So how do you recreate that feeling? Just live in that feeling eternally. Zen will teach you for every positive there's a negative. You can't have the extreme of either for too long. But the feeling thing that comes up, again, I think there's an important thing at identifying when stuff is happening to you. It didn't sound like you identified this necessarily when you were in the corporate world with stress. And again, I was in the same situation. It almost sounds like a similar career story. But I had that same thing going on. But it's same as thinking when it comes to feeling. If you can start to give labels to the way that you're feeling, it starts to have less power over you, because not only are you conscious of it, but you're conscious of exactly what it is that it's doing to your body. And you're stopping this whole program running, because this program will run every single time the same issue comes up. So whether it's an anxiety or whatever it is, it's going to keep running and running.
Are you talking about then, for example, I don't know, I'm making this up. Let's say we call it Grumpy Money Lee. So when it happens, it's like, oh, here's Grumpy Money Lee, and because you're labeling it like that, the first thing that comes to mind, because you're labeling it like that, there's a little bit of humor to it. So you're taking a kind of a more of a lighter approach. So that kind of helps, I guess. But also you're able to communicate with those particularly closest to you. Look, I'm going through the Grumpy Money Lee's turned up, and then you're not just dealing with it on your own, I guess. Your partner can also help you too. You're
disassociating, which is really the same as what I'm talking about here. So you're recognizing what it is that's within you, and you're saying that's not part of me. So it's the same sort of idea as disassociating. Grumpy Money Lee. I like that.
That's my new one, Grumpy Money Lee.
Yeah. You're writing that down for the book.
I am.
Yeah.
Grumpy
so,
Money
I mean, the next step is, depending on whether you can control this feeling or get on top of it, is going to determine what action you take. So if you're going to allow this feeling to control you, as it will do for many anxiety sufferers, then there's two paths that they can take. They can take the right path, or they can take the path that they've always taken. Now, the path that they've always taken might be slightly painful, but it's not as painful as paths that they've experienced previously. So pretty much anyone with anxiety, if they don't resolve their issues, are always going to take that easy path, right? So if you've got social anxiety, you just won't go to the party.
Mm-hmm.
If you suffer from, I don't know, insomnia, then you'll just deal with it. You'll drink coffee when you get up in the morning, which probably makes you worse. If you suffer from phobias, well, you'll run out the room when the spider comes in. But if you can get on top of this thinking and become conscious of it and just disassociate or nominalize it and do the same with the feeling, well, that right path is less scary. So the action that you might take is going to be a more positive one. You might deal with the spider, or you might go to the party, right? And I think that this is a decision point where addiction can come in as well, which we can talk about in a minute, which will be useful for you guys. Because this is the point that decides, am I going to run, or am I going to cope, or am I going to take the right path that's for me here? But of course, many people will take that path that they've always taken, the one that's not so good for them. It hurts a wee bit, it's a bit bumpy, and that leads them to an outcome where, if they've got social anxiety, they might end up with no friends. They might end up, the family doesn't come round to visit them. And all of that really impacts their state or their mood, and the state of their mood ultimately impacts their thoughts. So you can see how that all goes round in a cycle. And the only real points of intervention are when it comes to thought, when it comes to feeling, or when it comes to your actions. And you're only going to take good actions if you start to align your thoughts and your feelings.
It's interesting. I've been learning some cognitive behavioral therapy techniques, right, over the last couple of weeks. And one of the things that I did is I started to keep a detailed log on Evernote on my phone. Every time I did something, I mean anything, take a shower, take a dump, go for a walk, have a podcast. After I finished it, I ranked myself 0 out of 10 on terms of pleasure, with 10 being really pleasurable, 0 being crap. And I rated myself a mastery score, which was how difficult was it for me to get off my arse and do what I did, with 10 being really, really difficult, or 0 being not very hard at all. And something really interesting came out of the practice that people can learn from here. And I suggest people do this, by the way. But this is what come out for me, James. And I don't know if you've noticed this before. The activities that I assumed were causing me anxiety, that I didn't like doing, after I'd done them, I actually scored them quite high in terms of pleasure. And my M score was middling. So it was difficult for me to do it. But once I started doing it, I really enjoyed it. So I looked back and thought, I'm enjoying everything I'm doing. What's happening? And I realised in that moment, clear as crystal, that all my angst, all this knots, all the feeling, everything, all the negative associations, all the stress, the tiredness, everything negative was all generated by my own thoughts, worrying about what I was going to do. The actual thing that I was doing that I was worrying about, I enjoyed it. It was absolutely, boom, right in front of my face.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And when it comes to that sort of thing, I released a video onto my Facebook page last week about it. I labelled it as procrastination, but this is, I think this will be really useful because the opposite side of procrastination is potentially addiction here, which I think might be useful for you guys. But so procrastination, don't know about you, but certainly me in the past, and I know many of your listeners as well, will think of procrastination and probably give themselves a title like lazy. So I'm just being lazy. Or there's lazy James or lazy Lee. Just getting into it. But the thing about procrastination is that, well, what goes on in our mind when we procrastinate? Because that's the important thing here. It's what goes on in our minds. And what goes on in our minds is that we see ourselves taking the first step. And we see ourselves inside our mind going, either it's too difficult, or someone's going to say that we've not done it well enough, or we're going to feel self-confident or lack of self-confidence in doing it. And so we don't do it. This is what happens with procrastination because, like you said, you can just get up and do it.
Yeah.
But the same sort of thing happens with people who are on a diet. So if you're on a diet and maybe you've done well all day and you've watched your calories, you've counted them, and then it gets to maybe 9 o'clock, and then you see that packet of biscuits. And then, well, what happens? Well, you eat one biscuit, and you'll go on to maybe eat 3 or 4. And there's probably 100 people, smiling at that sort of thought just now because we've all been through it when we've got the diet.
Yeah.
But what's the key thing in all of that is that the procrastinator doesn't take that first step, because if the procrastinator takes the first step, they're more than likely going to see that the story that they've made up is false. The second step is actually a lot easier to take now. So they're more motivated to take that second step. Just like the person who eats the biscuit is more motivated, or their inhibitions are lowered, shall we say, that it makes it easier for them to take the second biscuit.
Okay, let me just...
that makes sense?
Yeah, let me tell you what's coming up for me right now. So, you have people here who are suffering from alcohol addiction, who one of the reasons that let's say someone's just quit alcohol, all of a sudden now they have all this time in front of their hands because they're no longer drinking. So they don't have to think about, they don't have to buy clothes to wear to parties. They don't have to go to parties. They don't have to think about where they're going to get their booze from. None of these things matter anymore. So they have all this white space, right? They have all this time to fill and this clarity of mind. And it scares them because they've never had it before. It's always been filled with thoughts and stuff and activities. So it scares them to be on their own. So then they start saying, James, Lee, what do I do? And we say, well, maybe one of the things you could do is kind of figure out what's really important to you in life, what you want to do that you've always wanted to do, and we can focus on filling your white space up with that. Some people call it meaning and purpose, whatever it is, right? And then they get procrastinated because they can't take that first step. However, that same person knows full well that if they take a drink of alcohol, just one drink, they're going to end up in a fucking gutter. Yeah. So what you're saying is use that knowledge. Know that if you have a drink, you're going to have a lot of drinks, right? You're going to go through with it. The first step. It's all
about momentum, Lee.
Yeah.
So if it's procrastination, you don't have the momentum.
Right.
You take the first step, you create the momentum.
Right.
If you same with addiction or chocolates, it's the same thing. As soon as you take that first step, you've got the momentum. Yeah. So you're going to go through with it.
So you use that knowledge. Know that you have, momentum. You felt momentum. Momentum is addiction. You know what it feels like. You know where it takes you. Use that in a positive sense and just get yourself over that first hurdle and write that first key, string that first guitar, sing that first note, put that first step forward when you're running, that type of stuff. Really good way of putting it, James. I never thought of it like that before.
Or go out and help people, because the world needs a hell of a lot more people like us out there helping people. Yeah. There's so many people out there suffering. You and I both know that. So write a book if you've got experiences there that help. But it is that white space, isn't it? And I think that's the same for many people. And it's even for people who suffer from anxiety as well. So someone who's been maybe agoraphobic for 20 years, stuck in the house, or maybe only left the house once or twice, and just the thought of having to go out into that big bad world again when all they've known is this comfort zone. So you can go and you can fix all of that, but you're going to create this white space for them that's just going to almost pull them back to what they know. Yeah. So, and I mean, you'll be the expert when it comes to addictions, but it's really about having a plan, isn't it? Next. So if you can have a plan, even if it's high level, you've got something to work to. Maybe you want to add a bit more into that just to close that cycle.
What works for me is by experimenting, right? So rather than doing nothing, to be proactive and experiment. So do things like I said with the pleasure mastery scale. Like, what am I doing all day? You know, the old time emotion study in business, right? Like I've got 10 employees. I want to get them down to 5. So I'm going to figure out what they do so I can get them to work harder, right? So use the time emotion study in your own life. Figure out what you're doing in your own life. Is it providing you pleasure? Is it aligned with your meaning and purpose, what you want to do in life? Those type of things. And start experimenting, you know, and then once you start experimenting and you start to get a feel that, okay, I need to stop doing this, or I need to do that. And actually, I feel really good when I do this. I've just got to get over that first hurdle. With those experiments comes almost like it's almost like you're solidifying that knowledge. I'm thinking of like, I just wrote this article, a poker article, about how the more a poker player plays poker, so he plays poker, right? He's creating thicker strands of myelin, which makes his practice almost automatic. And that is what we're doing when we're dealing with life after addiction. It's practice. It's almost like growing those sheaves of myelin. It's like you can't just quit drinking and then everything's going to be all right. You've got to really work at becoming your authentic self again. That's what come up for me. And I particularly, James, focusing on one thing at a time. Like I find myself stressing out every day. How am I going to fit everything into this moment? And having a 5-month-old child really helps me, because I'll get down on my hands and knees when she's on the floor and I'll cuddle up to her and I'll have my phone in my hand, because it's my time with Zia, but like I can like multitask, and then I'm like, no, one thing at a time. I put the phone down and I just throw myself into my daughter. And guess what happens when I throw myself into that one task? I don't worry about any other task. I give her my full attention.
Yeah.
She feels that connection and loves me. My wife can see me with that connection. She loves me. And you then feel better. And then you're done with your daughter. Right, I now got to have an interview with James. You throw yourself into that. I'm not now thinking about anything else. We're just enjoying this moment, right? And I think that's what happens when you get that white space with addiction is... do you like football, James?
I do, yes.
All right,
yes.
So when Lincoln beat Burnley in the FA Cup, right? The Lincoln manager was on Match of the Day and he said, we broke the game down into 15-minute games, right? I was like, whoa, I've never heard that before. I've heard it's a game of 2 halves.
It's not a game of 6 halves.
No, but it makes perfect sense, right?
Yeah.
It's people in addiction say, take one day at a time. Don't take one day at a time. Take 15 minutes at a time. Take 30 minutes at a time. Take one. Can you get through this next 30 minutes? Are you going to drop dead in the next 30 minutes if you can't figure out what you're going to do? I like that analogy of like chunking things down to the level that you can handle it and be comfortable with it. And then over time, gradually extend that time period. Does that make sense?
Well, it does. I mean, the only time anxiety exists is not now. It's in the future or it's in the past. So when people are worrying and this white space, this isn't white space caused by now. This is white space caused by what should I be doing? What does the future look like? Or how am I escaping the past? When people are just in the present moment and truly in it, like you were with your child, then nothing else matters.
So people,
there's no future and there's no past.
So people are listening to this right now, thinking to themselves, "Oh my God, how am I going to fix my anxiety issue later on?" The key here is just focus on right now, listening and absorbing what me and James are saying, because worrying about what is happening in the future or how you're going to implement this learning in the future is going to create anxiety. But if you just focus on what me and James are talking about, or make notes, especially, a lot of people listen to podcasts, they don't do this. Carry a dictaphone around with you, or use Siri on your mobile phone, folks, and use the voice recorder to take notes. That's what I do when I'm driving, or if you're at home, write it down. What James is saying is the past doesn't exist, the future doesn't exist, and we are creating stress because we worry about things we've done in the past and we worry about what we're going to screw up in the future. what we're saying here, James, tell me if I'm wrong, is that 100% of our anxiety is self-created because we're allowing these thoughts.
No, that's what we're saying. I mean, outside events happen. So people leave us, people treat us badly. But when that's happened, that's happened. It's only our thinking about it that causes us the anxiety. And so true with when the future, if you're worried about, well, that's me without a drink for a week. What's going to happen when it comes to that party next week? If you start making yourself anxious about that just now, well, it's not because of the future has happened. That's irrational as much as thinking about the past is in this present moment. You're building that up just now in yourself. If you just worry about what you're doing just now, and I've got other techniques for this, which some of my clients quite like as well. It's just, if you're sitting in a room just now, and I don't know if everyone will be if they're listening to this, or be able to do this, is just focus on what's around you. So notice things that you haven't noticed. If you, I don't know, see the colour purple, notice all the other things that are purple in the room. If you see something that's blue, notice all the other things that are blue, or shapes, all the things that are circular in the room. And that has the ability, that just grounds you in the present moment. You're going to notice things that you haven't noticed before. You've maybe noticed a book in the background that you hadn't noticed before. That's what people tend to do when they start actually looking around them and noticing what's in the room around them.
I just noticed that I need to clean my office. You just created anxiety for me, James. I totally get what you're saying. You just reminded me of one of my forum members who does a lot of walking. And he said the other day, he stresses out when he's walking 100 miles an hour, trying to get his goal in for his 10,000 steps a day and everything's stressing out, etc. And he noticed that when he just decided to walk and forget everything else, he suddenly started to see birds, trees, leaves, nature. And when he wrote that, there you are, a jay has just flown into my tree. I noticed a jay. So I just went off tangent there. I always have ridiculed my wife for eating so slow, for walking so slow, for running so slow, for doing everything so slow. And it wasn't until just recently that I realized, and I think it was because my son made a comment and said, "Why is Liza so fucking slow? It does my head in." And I realized that because I operate 100 mile an hour, my son operates 100 mile an hour because he's like a little mini me, right? And when I operate 100 mile an hour, which is a story that I've created, which says that that's my foundational me, which I know is not true.
Yeah.
I have stress. Think about that, folks, listening to this now. If you were walking really fast to get somewhere, or you're really trying to get things done really quickly to get somewhere else, you will feel that physical sensation in your stomach that me and James were talking about earlier on. But if you just say to yourself, actually, like, what's the worst that can happen here if I just chill the fuck out, right? And take my time. All of a sudden, you just get that lightness because you're just focusing on the moment. And what you find is the things that you don't get done in a day, they're there tomorrow. It's like nothing happens. You don't drop dead. You don't lose your house. You don't lose your job. Those things. They don't happen.
They're probably there tomorrow anyway because you get so stressed out that you can't think properly. And so you end up not doing them.
Yeah. And it's something I wanted to talk to you about, James, if you don't mind. I was dealing with someone the other day who came in the forum and then left the forum, who, using the person's own words, very cynical about NLP, right? And just couldn't accept these skills, this experience, this knowledge that we're talking about here. And this wasn't this person saying this, but I'm going to use an example. Is somebody who was raped or went through incest as a child or something, who now uses as a coping mechanism. And we're saying that although that happened to you, and as horrific as that was, it's not happened to you right now. You're creating that pain and misery by going back to that past. Now, as true as that is, that could be really difficult for someone to accept.
Absolutely, yeah.
So how do we help people help themselves to come to terms with those things? Because it almost feels like they feel a need to hold on to it.
Yeah. The reality is that some people will not be able to let go. And I don't think there's a magic method out there. I don't think there's coaches like you or I can necessarily make people in that situation step out of the darkness and into the light. As much as we would want to, as coaches, help everybody, especially the people who are really suffering the most, there are people out there who just can't let go of it, and they need to make that step forward themselves, really. So I know this woman that you talk about, I don't know her, but a woman with that situation is going to be feeling a lot of pain, and she doesn't want to feel that pain. No one ever does want to feel that pain, but it comes back to that kind of, is it more painful to take a new path, or do I just keep taking the path that I've always taken, as painful as that is? It's that decision point, when it comes to the feeling and the thoughts before you take your action. It's what's the least painful for me. And that person really would have to come to a point where they think an alternative is less painful. They'd have to believe that an alternative could be less painful before they'd be willing to take that step. And I know that's a tough thing for you. It's a tough thing for me. It's a tough thing for any of the coaches that we work alongside, that we just want to help everybody on the way.
I think what I want to share, and jump in at any time here, James, if you disagree with me on anything that I say here, but the way that I see the world is, I believe that fundamentally as human beings, we are all born with the same hardware and software. So our hardware is our muscles, our bone structures. All right, we're all physically different. Some of us might even be born with diseases, but essentially our hardware is pretty much the same. We got 2 arms, 2 legs, etc., right? And we also have the same software. So we also have a mind, a perceived self. We won't go into the debate on whether that's real or not, but we believe
created, possibly, but
right. But most of us think we are someone, okay, and I believe that the mind pretty much works the same for everybody, and I believe that the only thing that changes us and makes us unique, and we are all unique, is the level and the different flavors of contaminated thinking that we allow through our filters from the outside world, which are heavily dependent on our environment, our societies, our parents, our teachers, our bosses, our best friends who we hang around with. That is what makes us unique. But at the core, we are all got the same hardware and software. So what does that mean? Why am I saying this? Although it is really, really difficult to help someone who has been through a really, really difficult traumatic situation, because we all kind of operate and work the same way, our minds work the same way, I want you to take solace that you can change. Because there will be so many people out there who have been through the same thing, who have managed to change. And my advice would be is to never give up. Like, I've been at the Landmark Forum once. I did a 3-day seminar at the Landmark Forum, and I saw incest victims stand up on the mic and forgive the people who had committed these horrendous crimes, and just break down into tears and and feel like they could move on. Now that is not like saying, that's not condoning these horrific things. I think that they're completely different. Forgiving someone and moving on is for themselves. It's not for the person who perpetrated the crime, right? And so I've seen people do this. So, and what I've learned, I talked to Greg Suki the other day on the podcast, and I said to Greg Suki, I said, Greg, I gave up reading this book, and this is how I've been teaching people how to quit alcohol. It's Alan Carr's Easy Way to Control Alcohol. I've been teaching this method, and Greg said, it's not the book. You had a personal insight while you were reading the book, and you believe that it's the book. You had an insight. You had a moment of enlightenment. You had a change. That's what happened in the Landmark Forum with these people. That's what will happen with you out there if you keep working at trying to become your authentic self. Yeah. Just keep working at it. And I really do believe that at some moment the light comes on. Sometimes you just don't even know it's come on. Do you know what I mean?
There was a phrase that someone said to me, and it was, life becomes easier when you learn to accept the apology you never received. It's a powerful phrase, especially for people who've been wronged, because it's almost, and I've worked with a lot of people in this area as well, who they carry so much blame against the person who perpetrated stuff against them. So that could be, that could be a husband that's cheated on them, abused them. It could be a father figure. It could be someone who just left them behind and made them feel lost. And it's the feeling that was created in them that keeps dragging them back. But they anchor it to the person. So they're blaming the person, rightly so, for their actions, because they were supposedly there for them, but not there for them in the way they should have been. But they're always blaming this person, and that's the story they have in their mind. That's the one that they keep replaying that makes them feel bad. So if they can stand up and just forgive, even if they're not forgiving that person, but they're just forgiving themselves for moving on, then that can be very empowering for people in that situation.
This happened when my ex-wife divorced me. She divorced me, and I knew the best place for my son to be raised was with his mum. Well, that's not true, actually. I didn't want to break her heart by fighting for custody for my boy. I would rather break my own heart than break my ex-wife's heart. So I didn't fight, and I just said, go and live with your mum. And I would make that decision a million times over, even though it changed our relationship forever and means I've missed out in huge parts of his life for the last 6 years. I'll never get that back. But I had a lot of anger towards her, James, because there were time periods where she couldn't understand my worldview and my changes in the way that I parented. And the way that I parented didn't fit into her worldview of a good parent, quite the opposite. And she would penalize me by making things difficult for me. So I wasn't able to take him away. I couldn't see him when I wanted to see him. Lots of different things like that. And I used to get really, really angry. I remember headbutting the wall at one point just because I had a new wife who couldn't understand why I was spending so much time worrying about my ex-wife. I had an ex-wife who thought I was the worst person in the world. I had a son I couldn't see, and I just didn't know what to do. And then I realized that if I just forgive her and understand that she's only angry at me because I've hurt her in some way, and that she just wants the best for her child, and she believes I'm not providing that. If I can step into her shoes, if I can feel that, if I can understand that, what will it be like? And it really allowed the anger to disappear. And it allowed me to move on, and there was other things as well. I had to break communication with her. I don't talk to her anymore because it's not good for me, although I would dearly love to be able to. She hasn't forgiven me, and she won't forgive me, and so that's why it will always be difficult. So I would encourage people to, if you've got like a husband or someone or a wife who's drinking and you've quit and they're like making your life miserable and holy hell, is you've always got to try to put yourself in their shoes and kind of figure out, okay, what's going on for them? Why are they behaving the way that they are? And I guess it's acceptance is the right word, James, isn't it? That we are all different, and to accept that difference about each other, that the world, the way that we've been influenced by the world has changed us all, and we need to accept that. I'm sounding all a bit strange here now, but this is the way I've been thinking a lot lately.
The analogy I give is, if someone doesn't hold the door open for you, right? This is just a simple example, but if someone doesn't hold the door open for you, then you get angry at them. You think that they've not done the social thing that they should have. The whole world's gone rude. I don't want to live in this world anymore. And who does that harm?
Yeah.
Because the other person's just away walking. They're probably in a daydream. That they've had a bad day or whatever. The wife's walked out on them and they're not even thinking straight. They've had a bad day, but you're the one that's building up all this anger inside of you. For what? Yeah. Because you had to open the door all by yourself. It's
we started this off with the baby fare, right? And me worrying about the money and stuff. And when we was on the tube, I was holding my 5-month-old daughter. The tube was packed, and there's seats for pregnant women. All right, I'm not a pregnant woman. I'm a guy, my wife, her face, and she was very passively aggressively saying, "Oh, you think that people would stand up?" And she was getting really angry. And I was saying to her, "That's not serving you. Just chill out. They probably can't even see me, And if I really wanted the seat, I could go over and say, 'Excuse me, can I sit down?'"
Yeah.
It's good example. Can I ask you another question? We're on the same lines here, but I want to use this scenario and we'll work around it because I know it will help a member of my community. So we said we like football earlier on, okay? Let's say that we want to quit drinking, and the biggest problem we have is that we love playing football for this football team, and they're a bunch of pissheads. And this person is feeling extreme anxiety to tell their teammates that they don't want to drink anymore. And so they just drink. Or they try really hard not to, but because of the peer pressure and the lads taking the piss out of them, they cave in all the time.
Yeah.
What would your advice be to someone? And again, we might have covered some of these points, but I think it will help. What advice would you give to somebody who is stuck in that rut?
Well, I think it's important, I guess, to keep yourself occupied, and playing football, if that's the thing that they do, important to keep that up. What I'm hearing in there isn't necessarily the addiction talking. This is social anxiety almost, isn't it? A feeling of sort of inadequacy around these guys, that you can't just turn around and say, "No, I'm drinking this lemonade, you shut your face."
Yeah.
Because I know around my friends, and obviously I suffered more when I was younger, where I would just kind of give in to peer pressure, but the older you get and the more you overcome this, it'd just be like, "Well, no, I'm drinking this lemonade. You all, drink all you want, but I'll be in the first team next week and you won't."
Uh-huh.
So I think you have to deal more with, maybe it's the feeling of standing up to these people. Maybe that's where the anxiety is coming from. And so using that kind of technique that I spoke about earlier of, before you even go there, just play the scenario through in your mind and what thoughts go through your mind. Because we do this, don't we? We argue with ourselves. as if we make up the conversation. And that's maybe what your forum member did. They've only made up the conversation of how it's going to go. But then tune into the feeling that comes with that. And do the tip that I said about starting to notice what the feeling looks like and whereabouts in the body, if you can move it, things like that. Try and take control over the feeling, because that's what happens when we get these kind of bouts of social anxiety or feeling inadequate or don't want to stand up to peer pressure. We get that stress coming along, and that's the bit that ultimately drives us to go, okay, give me the pint.
Yeah, I think back to when I was 16 playing with the adult team, and if I would have known what the future was going to hold for me, I would have just turned around and said, no, I don't want to drink. But there was no way on earth I was ever going to tell these grown men who I so desperately wanted to be a part of, because I would have been so cool. There was no way I was going to say I wasn't going to drink.
So validation's a factor there, isn't it? You were getting your validation from them.
Yeah. I was getting validation that I was a man. Which is stupid if you think about it, because as a 16-year-old playing senior football, actually I was younger than 16. I think I was 14, 15. I know I was underage. Your ability to be competing with these people at such a young age should be justifiable enough. But you realise that it's not just about, well, you tell yourself a story that isn't going to be good enough. You're actually going to have to take drugs and drink to be good enough. And I guess what you say, James, is how do you know? So you're creating this story that if I tell my teammates that I don't want to drink anymore, and more than that, I don't want to drink and I really, really need your support with this, you're then creating this story in your mind about how you're going to play it out, and your plot, your script has them laughing at you and joking and taking a piss. But you don't know because you haven't tried.
Momentum. But don't go into the momentum without testing it out yourself to make sure that you're comfortable.
So are we saying that that first step of going in the changing rooms is almost like procrastination, like what we were talking about earlier on?
Going in the changing rooms. I mean, if you don't go there and you don't play the football, that's definitely the procrastination.
No, let's say you want to play football. You're never going to stop playing football. You love it that much that you would break your sobriety to play, right? But you desperately want to quit drinking. And we've now just told this person listening, look, you're creating these thoughts in your mind that they're going to treat you like a bag of shit and you're therefore going to be ridiculed and thrown out of the team. Is that true? I mean, I guess there's two ways you could look at this. One is you could do a little written exercise, couldn't you? And you could ask yourself the question, is it true that they're going to kick me out of the team if I tell them that I'm going to quit drinking? Well, it's not, is it? So you could do a written exercise, but how do you actually open your mouth and say it?
Which is a tougher bit without the anxiety coming back. So that's what I'm saying. If you go through this story in your mind and start to notice the feelings that are coming into your body, because they will come into your body as if you're having the conversation. That's what we do. That's why we can get ourselves completely stressed out over something that's not even happening, because we create the story, the plot thickens and we get the feeling that goes with it. So if that's not feeling good for you, then, start to notice how it is feeling and then try to give it labels and try to make it feel a bit softer for you. If you just don't think that route's going to work for you, and bearing in mind football and drink don't go hand in hand. They may be doing your life story or your forum member story, they may go hand in hand, but they don't. Drinking and football don't need to go hand in hand. There can be socialising in football, there can be drinking and socialising, and there can be all three things at the same time, but equally they can all be independent. So if someone was worried about that, they could speak to one of the members in the group, one of them who's most supportive, and say, look, Dave, I'm not going to be able to drink anymore because, I'm off the drink now. It was causing me too many problems. What do you think? You think the boys will take the piss out of me? And he'll go, of course they will. Of course they'll take the piss out of you. They'll go, but then you know what's going to happen and you just go along and drink your lemonade. But if your core problem here is validation, like we talk about the 16-year-old boy, then, and this is going to be common, I guess, for a lot of people with addictions, particularly who've escaped for many years. The validation is going to be a problem because they haven't found themselves. They haven't found the internal validation within them.
Yeah.
The thing that drives them, the thing that makes them feel worthwhile in the world. That's really where you want to be getting to, isn't it?
Yeah, I think the person who is drinking and can't tell their teammates that they don't want to is being inauthentic, and the more that they live in that inauthenticity, the less likely it is that they're going to be able to quit. Their authentic self is the person who doesn't want to drink. That's their authentic self. And it's just understanding. I think you make a really good point there. Sometimes a lot of people are going to need some help, and rather than getting the whole team together and saying, okay, guys, listen up, I got something to tell you. You could actually be smart about this and strategic and say to yourself, okay, there's 11 players in this team. Who are the dickheads? Who are the people who I think are really close to me? Who are the ones who I really trust? Who are the ones who are going to listen to me? Get the ones who you trust on your side. Tell them what you're going to do and have them stand by you when you talk about this thing. I'll tell you what come up for me. I did a video on this earlier on, actually, James. It was Gareth Thomas, the Welsh rugby union player. I'll repeat myself because people might not have seen my video earlier on. I went to school with Gareth Thomas, right? And Gareth turned into an absolute monster, 6 foot plus, built like a brick shithouse, one of the greatest rugby players Wales has ever produced. And he lived a life of inauthenticity because he was gay. And at some point, he had to say to all these other 7 foot tall behemoths of men, not just ordinary men, big fuck off superhero men, he had to tell them, look guys, even though I strip off naked and shower with you and bathe with you and get in a scrum with you and play around with you, I need you to know that I'm gay. And when nobody in sport was ever doing that, you know? And like we were saying earlier on about us all being fundamentally the same, hardware and software, I would use people like Gareth as an example of someone who must have gone through the same pain, the same fear, the same stress, the same worry, the same anxiety. As big and as strong and as ugly as he is, he went through the same shit. But he managed to somehow put his journey of authenticity above those fears and look more long term than short term, I guess. Because the short term pain is I think I'm going to look a fool here. The long term gain is I can be my authentic self. I can turn up at football every week, not drink. And not only will I inspire people, but people will not take the piss. It will just die. Like, people used to take the piss all the time when I gave up drinking. They don't do it now. It's just Lee the non-drinker. They actually come to me and say, oh, Lee, help me quit drinking. You know?
Yeah. No, that was an interesting point you said about the rugby player, Gareth Thomas there. I'd never thought through what that would look like from his perspective. You know, you hear this thing announced in the press of rugby player announces he's gay or footballer announces he's gay, and it doesn't happen that often. But yeah, these guys are showering together. You're going to have this kind of male bonding, especially in rugby, the scrummage and stuff. You can sort of imagine that if you had someone who didn't like gay people in the team, how they would react to that.
Yeah.
You know, as if, oh, you've touched me, or were you thinking about, you know, and I had never thought of it from that perspective before. It must have been absolutely terrifying for him to come out and say that, because he would have replayed all these, him being in that
for years,
would have replayed all that story, he would have seen all that
for many years, and especially because he was actually the first big time sportsman who actually come out while he was at the top of his playing. It's not like he's quit. And I think that, yeah, I think it was a huge one for people to, look. A lot of people listening to this don't even know what rugby is. Probably don't even know who Gareth Thomas is, but research it and check it out. And the funny thing, what James said was, then imagine if there was someone in the change rooms who was homophobic. Okay, you can liken that to somebody in your sphere of influence who really takes umbrage to the fact that you don't want to drink anymore, or you want to be a vegan, or you don't want to eat sugar, or you don't want to smoke, or you don't want to take drugs anymore, right? Well, why do you want them in your life? Like, seriously, there are 7 billion people in the world. If this one person really cannot accept you for who you are, why do you want them in your life? And I'm sorry, but my ex-wife divorced me despite her loving me because I was no good for her in her life. Like, sometimes you just have to... You have to be respectful and be really unselfish. I think there's a selfishness in keeping these people close to you that you don't need, that are causing you pain, because you cannot be giving them 100%. Like, I wasn't giving my wife 100%. If I was, she wouldn't have asked for a divorce, right? And I would have stayed in that relationship miserable for the rest of my life. How fucking selfish is that? Because I would have dragged her along with me miserable until the day we end. So it really is really difficult. Read some Don Miguel Ruiz, folks. He always sorts me out when I start thinking about relationships and all that kind of stuff. Anyway, I'm glad that we spoke about that, because I think that will really help someone. How can people get hold of you, James? And what are you doing at the moment in terms of, I know you've got a book out, see you've got a training course as well, or you used to have a training course. Talk a little bit about what you can do to help people who are listening to this, suffering from addictions, and the cause of their addictions is anxiety, and they really want to get a handle over it. How can you help them?
Yeah, I guess for anyone wanting to get in touch with me, the Facebook page is the main place that people interact on. That's facebook.com/James Quigley Official or jamesquigley.com. Like I said, yeah, I've got the book out there, Little Book for Anxiety. That talks through the process of where anxieties come from. So a lot of people, like I said, they want relief. If you want relief, come over to the page. I'm sharing loads of tips and coping mechanisms, but we obviously can't resolve anxieties. It's a journey if you want to resolve your anxieties. And the book goes one step towards that in terms of taking you through maybe some childhood events and showing you how anxiety forms and then sort of evolves through life up until, boom, the kind of trigger point in life. So I guess, yeah, there was the training course. I'm working on a new training course just now, probably going to be out towards the end of this month. Mm-hmm. It's going to be an all-in package that we're looking at. So this is an idea of coping, but also some one-to-one coaching as well in there, just to get people over it. Because I know there's systems out there from other coaches, and the chat that I'm getting from my followers is that they just don't go far enough. They give you a bit of respite, but they're not the full bang. Yeah. So that's what I'm working on. And that's born out of, I guess, the systems that I use with clients. So we've spoken about some of it today. The systems that I use with clients to get them conscious of these things and bring them to the forefront, and then go back to the anxiety and work through it, and then work through the life again as if it's free. And just, I guess, to finish up on the point that you were talking about cutting these people out of your life, because there's 7 billion people in your life. But the same goes true for bits of us as well. So there's bits of us that we don't like. But I guess the common thing I hear from people is, I just can't change. This is me. And it's just not true. No. You're under no obligation to be the person that you were yesterday. Tomorrow's a different day as well. Just because you've learnt a system doesn't mean you can't unlearn or find a better way of doing things. And whether that's addictions or whether that's anxiety, there's always the ability to change.
Yeah.
It's just that you have to want it, and you have to believe that it's possible. And I guess people like you and I are probably examples out there who've come from kind of the bottom of where these things can take you, and we're out there helping people. And that's maybe not for everyone, but you can come a little bit in the journey as far as you want.
Yeah, it's what you're talking about there is just like so important in addiction. It's resistance, and look, I've quit alcohol, cigarettes, pornography, gambling, sugar, meat, dairy, you name it, I've quit it, right? So I have a high threshold for overcoming resistance. But it doesn't disappear totally. You have to learn to live with it, because I just been told this morning I need to be out of my house by August. That means we're emigrating, we are traveling around the world, and I'm scared shitless of that, right? I have a resistance to that. I tell stories that, well, I'm the guy who lives in the UK. I'm not a traveler. What if this happens and that happens? And I start projecting into future thinking, and I start filling my thoughts up with bullshit that doesn't even exist. And then I just say to myself, oh, okay, let's just talk to James and finish this podcast, because that's what we're doing right now. So what James talks about there, resistance, really, really important, and deserves a podcast all on its own. Last question before I let you go.
Sure.
What were some of the books that come to mind for you, or podcasts or any other resources that you think will help people, other than your own, which we'll put in the show notes, that will help people that are struggling for anxiety?
A few of my biggest influences. It's probably a better way of putting it, because I don't necessarily have the momentum to read full books. But Eckhart Tolle was a definite influence on me in being able to stay grounded in the present moment and just see life for what it was. My biggest influence so far, Alan Watts, the philosopher. I don't know if you've come across him yourself, Lee.
Scottish, right?
Was he? No, I think he was English. He was English. But he moved to America and studied Zen Buddhism and brought it to the West.
I've heard of him, yeah.
The Dalai Lama as well. In terms of, he did, I can't remember what it was now, but he did an audio book with Paul Ekman, was it? As in the FBI psychologist, where they went toe-to-toe with one another, which I found very fascinating as well. It's useful just for the insights that we get into our own thinking. When you hear the Dalai Lama speak, it's awe-inspiring. What other influences, I guess, did I have? Those are really the main ones, I think. If you want to Google Michael Neill's Dragon Story, I posted that in my Facebook group a few weeks ago, because it's something that I go back and listen to routinely. I'm sure you've come across it, Lee.
I haven't. No.
Haven't?
I only heard of Michael Neill when I interviewed Mary Schiller the other day, and she told me that his book, The Inside Out Revolution, was her switch. So it's on my list of things to do. So I'll check that out. Yeah, definitely. Thanks for that, James. I just want to end with a little bit of gratitude, and people should listen to this, because it's really important. And we touched about this. James touched on this earlier on. When the white space is out there and you're worried about it because you've just quit your addiction, you don't know what to do yourself, go and help someone else. Like, take a leaf out of James' book here. James was suffering from anxiety. He did the work, started to read and kind of listen to and inquire about anything to do with anxiety to try to cure himself, in inverted commas. Realized that he had nothing to cure anyway. He just had to kind of find out who his true authentic self was. Did that work, realized that there were other people around the world that were struggling, and rather than just get on with life and become a multi-millionaire and just live on a yacht in Monte Carlo somewhere, he decided to help other people out, which is what he's doing right now on this podcast. So thank you for that, James, and people listening in.
Thank you.
You could do far worse and follow his model. Figure out what's going on with you. Find your way back to your authentic self, and then use your time to help other people do exactly the same as you have. And I'm telling you, you'll live a fulfilling life. James, thanks for being a guest on the Alcohol Addiction podcast. Really enjoyed your time.
Thank you very much for having me.
Stay in touch, yeah?
You too. Cheers, Lee.